Do you ever feel stuck? The alarm goes off and you think, is this really my life? Do you wish you could douse your relationships or your career or even your business with rocket fuel and throw a match on it? End the blah once and for all. They either launch or they burn up and you get to start over. I've been there and I see you. I'm Ben Walters, an entrepreneur, pastor, coach, and consultant. If you're ready to get unstuck and ignite your super pumped life or business, I'll give you the rocket fuel and the match. All you have to do is light it. Are you the assistant manager of a store, restaurant, hotel, assistant site manager, assistant coach, perhaps an assistant principal? Or maybe you're a vice president or an SVP or an executive director or a COO or a CFO. If you have people below you reporting to you, but also you have people above you, you're in a middle management position. And this 4-part series is to help you reclaim control of your life, your career, and your future. Last week in episode 19, we talked about how you're walking through a perilous minefield, but there are also possibilities out there as you attempt to navigate your way to the top. Today, I want to share 3 tips from the top that will help you ascend out of the middle and to a top position that you will be super pumped about. For more than 2 decades, I was the top leader of several companies that I either founded or acquired or that I was in a partnership in. And so I have had lots of middle managers, a mistake I see over and over and over with middle leaders. And I can't say this clearly enough. Stop sucking up. I don't want to be your drinking buddy. I don't want your holiday gift. Now, that may sound mean and that may sound heartless, but I have enough of everything I need. In fact, I want you to take those dollars that I'm paying you, which I wish were a lot more, and spend those on you, spend those on your family, spend those on your kids. No way should you be wasting that money you have on me. Put it in your kid's 529 plan. There's a famous scene, if you remember, from the movie Christmas Vacation, where the character Clark Griswold, he really wants a big holiday bonus. And so he buys something, I can't remember what it is, and he goes and bum to the executive suite, to the very top dog in his organization. And he says, hey, I brought you something for Christmas. And then he goes over to the credenza and there are, it looks like dozens of the exact same gift lined up on there. And then the boss fakes a phone call, even though the line you hear it. And it shows how ridiculous it is, because it shows that Clark wasn't the only one trying to suck up to the boss. Lots of other people were doing the same. And as one who has been at the top, I see that over and over. It's not just you that are coming thinking, hey, sucking up's the playbook that's going to get me to the top. But it's everybody else in your position. So you're the middle on this shift, but there's a middle on the next shift and the next shift. And there's a middle at another location, and that begins to compound. So here's the reality. Even if your boss has an open door policy, I don't want you standing in my doorway chewing the fat about how the local team did in the game last night. Let's think about this from 2 levels. I have a high level, results driven job that I don't have enough hours in the day to get all my work done. So every minute you're standing in that doorway, you're keeping me from doing my job. You're forcing me to be there a minute or 10 minutes or 30 minutes longer, right? And that stinks. And I begin to resent that. I begin to resent this guy who's just trying to suck up is making me get home later for dinner, miss my kid's baseball game, whatever that is. But the other thing, do you know what I'm thinking? Every minute you're standing in my doorway trying to curry favor, I'm thinking, don't you have a job to do? Why are you wasting time here? Are you avoiding the real work you should be doing? And so every minute you're there, I'm thinking, you're sucking time away from me and you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Now, how does that make me feel about you? You think that makes me think, boy, I really want that person to be the next successor in this organization, or I really want to write them that killer recommendation for a job they apply for somewhere else. No. It makes me think, you don't know what you're doing. And so the only kind of pedestrian play in your playbook is to come suck up to me. So don't do that. Do not do the blowing smoke game. It doesn't work. It's not effective. Now, some of you, and I know you're going to say, wait a minute, my boss needs that. My boss kind of has everybody come and kiss the ring. And I think maybe all of us have been in organizations like that, right? That your boss just expects the rank and file to come up and tell them how great they are and praise them and be like, you're the best. If you have that kind of boss, I'm going to tell you, be careful. There's a great post, and I mentioned it in episode 19 from Jack Barsky. It's on LinkedIn. You can look it up. But he talks about these bosses that are insecure. Because when they're insecure and they want you to come kiss the ring, guess what? They're threatened by you if you're competent. If you're doing a good job, guess what? At some point, that level of, that person's a threat. Your head's going to get chopped off. They are going to get rid of you. So if you're in an organization where the boss requires that, you ought to be polishing up that resume, figuring out how to get a connection and get somewhere else. Because ultimately, you can either do it for yourself and you can self-parachute out of that organization, or at some point, they will parachute you out, probably with no parachute. They'll just throw you out of the plane. Now, this brings me to my second bit of advice. The first one, stop sucking up. But the second one is, if you're a number two, be prepared. Be prepared for your moment to step into the number one role. I want to tell you a story. I was talking to a friend who is at the top of IT in a mid-sized company down in Arkansas. The CEO in his company had had a death in the family, and the CEO needed to be off the week of their 400-person annual town hall meeting. And so normally the kind of format is the CEO goes through a brief PowerPoint presentation, and then he kind of pumps the rank and file up about some of the things they're doing well. And then he talks about the state of the company, and he then maybe gives 2 or 3 challenges of things that either are coming in the next quarter or the next few quarters and what they need to be working on, or maybe some competitors that are creating kind of a threat to the company. And then at the end, he fields questions from anybody in the organization. Can basically go to the microphones. They've got 2 or 3 there in the auditorium, and they can talk about anything they want, whether it's operations, sales, customer service, big topics, anything like that. They might talk about tariffs. And so in this particular case, my friend was telling me how the CEO was out that week. And so the COO was asked to step in. And so I think the meeting was on a Thursday, and it came time, and everybody was assembled in the large auditorium. And the first thing was the IT guy said to the COO, do you have anything? We usually kind of work on the back end to make sure your presentation is flawless. And the CEO said, no, I don't have a formal presentation. And then my friend looked and he saw he doesn't even have any notes. And he thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. And so he wasn't ready for the big moment. And my friend knew it before that moment even arrived. And this COO, he kind of awkwardly walked to the podium, and you can tell when someone's not confident, right? The first thing he did, he didn't present anything about the company. He just said, does anybody have any questions? And everyone was bewildered, because normally that comes a few minutes into this whole company-wide town hall. Nobody raised their hand. Nobody headed to the mic. And he barely waited. And it was this, my friend said it was this like grueling, awkward silence in this room. You could hear a pin drop. And the COO was like, okay, if nobody has anything, meeting dismissed. He said the meeting lasted less than 1 minute. And everyone in the company was shocked. And some of the employees had driven from more remote areas of the region, 2 or 3 hour drive. And there was nothing. I asked my friend, I said, well, was that like death in the family that morning? And CEO literally like ran out the door 10 minutes before the thing. My friend said, no, he was off the entire week. This town hall was on a Thursday, and the CEO had been gone all week. The COO had the entire week to prepare and came up empty. 4 days to prepare that speech. Really, he'd had an entire length of his career at that company to prepare that speech. But he wasn't ready. He had no clue. He seemed to have no clue what the CEO did or what he should do in filling in that thing. Now, let me tell you about someone who was ready to lead. I was just over a year into a startup commercial cleaning business in Dayton, Ohio, and we were booming. We were going gangbusters. We'd already blown past the million in revenue mark. We were expanding our facilities, employees, customer base. We were really on a good upward trajectory. And concurrently, because I always like to do 2 or 3 things at the same time, I was in seminary. And so, as luck would have it, that summer I was required to do a full-time summer placement, ministry training formation thing. And so I knew it was going to be rough given I'm, the founder of a startup business, but I figured I could handle it because I would get a local placement, right? Well, imagine my surprise when I was placed in Washington, D.C. for 10 weeks. Now, if you want to test your people and your systems independent of the founder, yank the founder out of the business completely at this early stage of a startup and see what happens. Boy, you get a really good taste of whether this thing has legs or not. In this case, my second in command, Randy, did a fantastic job. He ran the company confidently and competently. And we were still rolling along 10 weeks later when I returned from DC. And because he ran things so well, guess what he got? He got a raise, which is awesome. And he also got a promotion. But he had to keep those added responsibilities. Those things he did when I was away for those 10 weeks, guess what? They just moved from my plate to his plate. That was awesome as a top dog. But it was also great for him because he gained more control over his fate. And then guess what it allowed me to do? It allowed me to turn my attention to market expansion. And instead of just being a Dayton, Ohio business, I bought a franchise in Cincinnati, and we moved into Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. And you know what I did? I turned the Dayton operations over to Randy because he did such a good job filling in that summer I was in DC. He became the number 1 in Dayton and never looked back. Now, a famous national example of this idea of being ready is Tom Brady. Most of you have heard of him, but for those who haven't, he is a quarterback in the professional sport of football. And when he started his career, he was the number 2. He was the backup to all-pro quarterback Drew Bledsoe in New England. And Bledsoe was a good quarterback. But you know what happened? Bledsoe got hurt. Football's a violent game. People go down. And do you know who was ready to step in? Tom Brady. He stepped in as the number 1 quarterback. He took his opportunity and he ran with it. He performed brilliantly. He led the Patriots to the Super Bowl and went on to become the greatest of all time, the GOAT. Meanwhile, do you know what happened to Bledsoe? Bledsoe was traded away to the Bills the next season. Then he went to the Cowboys, and he was still a fine quarterback. But the point here is you never know as a number 2 when you're going to get your shot. So pay attention to what the role entails. Keep notes of how you would do things. Be prepared. If you're the assistant manager of a store or a restaurant or a hotel or an assistant coach or an assistant principal, be ready. Life happens. Here's the reality. People get sick. People do dumb stuff and get themselves in trouble, and the board fires them. People move away. People retire. People crack and decide, I can't do this anymore. So if you have assistant in your title and dream of moving up to the top job, stop sucking up and pay attention to what the top dog does and be ready, because chances are you're going to get your opportunity to test drive that top position. The third thing I want to talk to you about, and it goes hand in hand with why sucking up is such a bad idea, is if you're in an organization of much size, and Randy's kind of a special case exception in my organizations, but there's a misunderstanding that the current top leader is going to pick their successor. And that really isn't the case, because in smaller privately held companies like some of the ones I owned, my exit plan is when I sell. And guess what? That means there's a new leadership coming in. So they're ultimately going to decide the fate of who moves up, who doesn't move up. It's not going to be me. But in larger organizations, it might be private equity who's deciding. It might be a board. It might be the ownership group. Those are the people who really decide, because most of the time in organizations, when the top dog resigns or retires, that organization moves on very quickly. As soon as you say you're done, you're a lame duck And guess what? The train rolls on. It doesn't stop. The board doesn't say, oh, tell us who you think should be the successor. So as a number two, if there's anyone you want to be on good terms with, it's the group the CEO reports to. Think about that. When your board of directors or your ownership group meets or comes to your workplace or you're invited to corporate, man, try to figure out how to get in front of them. And not in a threatening way, because that can get your head lopped off with an insecure top dog in your organization, but just get familiar with them and kind of get a sense of what they're looking for. If you're privy to go to those meetings where the CEO is reporting to them about things and they start asking questions, you're going to get a real clear idea what matters to them. Because a lot of times they're going to be banging on the CEO about certain things, whether it's market share or whether it's stock price or whether it's rolling out new ideas or, kind of expansion or contraction, whatever that is. Listen intently, figure that out, and then begin to formulate what you would do if you were in that role. Because a lot of times you'll see this. Your CEO has no clue on those. They don't have answers. So be the one that has answers, because you're kind of reading the tea leaves. If they're banging on your CEO for the third quarterly meeting in a row about something, chances are they're going to be replacing that CEO. And if you've come up with a plan of how to fix that problem, of how to be the solve, and you have an opportunity to interview for that position, you may be in the top dog's position sooner rather than later. So be prepared. Be ready. If you are a vice or an assistant out there, remember, your position is precarious. Your positions are being eliminated, but there are possibilities to move up as people retire, as people go away, as people are cut. So as a middle, I'm imploring you from the top, start sucking up. Don't do that. It's a bad look. Secondly, be prepared. And finally, try to get yourself engaged with those real decision makers. Try to understand what makes them tick, what they're seeking, and be ready, be prepared to offer what you have to offer about that. If you need executive coaching and a specific game plan to move from the middle to the top in your career, man, I would be super pumped to talk to you. Just book a free exploratory call. Let's talk things through a little bit, and then we can kind of game plan about what that would look like and how we would do that. But I would love to hear from you and help you get from where you are to where you want to be. Get you unstuck. I'm excited. Tune in next week for part 3 of this middle management series, when we talk about how to get remarkable productivity out of the people who report to you. Thanks for joining me today on the Super Pumped podcast. If you enjoyed today's show as much as I did, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app and tell your friends about the show so others can find and benefit from the Super Pumped community. And finally, to put the ideas from today's show into action, visit us at superpumped.com to view the show notes, book a complimentary consultation, or take our free business launch readiness assessment. Keep well, and I'll see you next time.